Hi, this is Odin Bharti and welcome to another episode of TFR Insight. As we all know that WordPress is one of the most popular open source CMSs, which is used by not only big brands, but also by a lot of individuals to publish great content. It makes it so easy. But this popularity also means that WordPress is among the top targets for cyber criminals. There was a time, where WordPress used to be one of the most insecure CMSs around there, but then they changed it. They started automatic updating. They did a lot of effort to make WordPress secure because WordPress itself is secure, but the users were not updating or patching their own installations. So today we are going to talk about the security of WordPress, but from a different angle, from a different side of the pond. Instead of talking to a security provider like Polyverse, we are going to talk to user side of the story. So, and today we have with us on our show, Maddy Osman. You are a sponsor Wrangler for WordCamp Denver, and you're also SEO content strategist for Blogsmith. Before we get into all this, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
You have so many hats that you're wearing there. So tell us a bit about yourself. What do you do, and what is your involvement with the WordPress community?
So yeah, WordPress, definitely my people. I have been using WordPress since college. I think it was probably sophomore year of college that I first had my first experience with WordPress. And ever since then, I've just fallen in love with the system. Web design has always been a hobby of mine. And even though I don't necessarily do that as much now, it's something that I use to create content for WordPress brands. That experience helps me to be able to translate some, developer speak into stuff that makes sense for the average user. And then besides just being a user of WordPress, I am also a multi-year volunteer for WordCamp Denver. So this year, like you said, I'm doing sponsor wrangling, helping to work with the sponsors and everything that goes into that. And then I also help with WordPress Denver Meetup, which is a newer thing that I've gotten involved with. And that's just kind of a very similar thing. Instead of organizing a conference, it's more or less just one-off events, more or less on a monthly basis. And I took on that role right kind of in the heat of the pandemic. So most of our events have been virtual so far, but that kind of provides a good summary of the different things that I've been doing in the WordPress community lately.
Okay, since you mentioned the crisis that we're going through and how it is changing the way we interact with people in communities, you mentioned the events are going online. I don't call it virtual because I am heavily into VR and AR. So whenever I see a virtual event, I'm like, I should put on my VR gear and I would actually walk through this. But that is not happening. So I like to call it online event, not virtual event. What has been your experience in terms of either interaction, in terms of access? I do feel that as compared to the physical event, your access is increased because people from all over the world can consume the content versus people who can visit. But talk a bit about the experience. How different is it?
Sure. I mean, I think it starts with the fact that like our tickets are completely free. Usually it's something like $25 a day, and the costs in general are kept low because of the sponsors that we work with. Otherwise, it would be like a couple $100 event in terms of all the expenses that really go into putting something like this on. But because we have shifted to a virtual landscape, that also does cut down some of our expenses. And because we had to shift to this virtual way of doing things so quickly, WordCamp Central, which is kind of like our governing organization that manages the similarities between the different camps and helps us to get different things in place and manages relationships with global sponsors who sponsor either all the events in a region or all the events around the world. They have helped to cover all of our expenses that are associated with streaming this event. So it's nice because we don't have to worry so much about the typical things that we worry about with a physical event. And then it also means that whatever money we can raise, we can use to do some fun things that maybe we wouldn't normally do. And what I'm really excited about with this event is giving people a couple different surprises that relate to local Denver. Like you said, this definitely, having it virtually definitely opens up access so more people can join. But we still wanted to have some sort of local flavor about our camp, something that's really Colorado, really Denver. And I won't spoil the surprises, but there are a lot of things that we were able to do, just trying to think on our feet and pulling things together that are going to make this a special camp that is, signature to Denver, I would say.
I'm also curious, about the kind of content that you create. Can you tell us about your blog itself?
My primary audience for the content that I'm creating, whether that's for clients or even just on my own blog, are B2B technology brands who are looking to find ways to connect with their ideal customer in search. So it's people who are wanting to use search to drive more relevant organic traffic to their websites. And a lot of the time, those B2B tech brands are WordPress brands. So again, it's like I'm kind of involved with this community from a lot of different perspectives, but I think that that's the reason why my business is successful in this space. It's because I'm not just trying to get in here, get some business and then call it a day. I really want to help anybody who needs help. And a lot of the things that I do, I do to support this community.
Why you chose WordPress as a platform for you, how it makes life easier. Because if you look at Drupal, you have everything at your disposal. You don't need a developer. You can just go do everything in there. So tell me, why WordPress?
First, it wasn't a choice because I worked for my college's student life marketing and design department. And my boss there really liked Silver Stripe, which is just like a really niche CMS by some people from Australia created it. Whenever I talk about it, every once in a while somebody knows what it is, but other than that, it's kind of obscure. And the reason that he chose that CMS was because it was really easy for us to kind of work in the back end and develop a website for student organizations or like student-led events on campus. And these are people who really don't have the time to learn how to edit a website or learn HTML and CSS. And so we had used that as a solution to give them something that they couldn't break, essentially. And then just as part of the natural progression of trying different CMS options, we also tried, it was either Drupal or Joomla, I can't remember. I remember making one website with one of those two CMSs. And then we had one client, which was a student organization. It was called Student Video Productions. And they just wanted to add a blog to their website. And then we later also redesigned their website. And so my boss saw it as the perfect opportunity to test out WordPress's functionality because we literally just needed like that piece of things. And he figured that it would be easy to kind of plug into whatever else we were building. And so I used like a bootstrap theme. I just kind of like built on top of basically no styling, just the basics. And I just really liked the process. And I really liked once I built it, how the dashboard functioned. And I thought it was even more straightforward than Silver Stripe. I definitely noticed that there were more editing options for that final end user, those student org members who would be updating these websites. And I guess it was just kind of a done deal after that. After using it and trying it for myself and seeing how easy it was to build a site, I just fell in love. And from here on out, I've always used WordPress for all my projects.
As much as I want to agree with you, because I said, I myself am WordPress user, the picture is not that rosy. There are some challenges also associated with running a WordPress powered site. Tell us about those challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've already said one of the biggest ones, which is because it is such a popular content management system powering over a third of the internet. It is a target for hackers. And it's kind of just like how you had like Windows versus Mac OS back in the day, and Mac had so few viruses that people made for it, or malicious code and whatever. And that was just because it wasn't as popular. Not as many people were using it, so there wasn't as big of a reason to go after it. But now, because so many people are using it, it is a popular target, and hackers seem to target vulnerabilities that happen when plugins, something's exposed, or themes, or even the core software. They find ways to get in before a patch is made. And then if people forget to upgrade to whatever the next version is, that's when they usually get in trouble, because when a vulnerability becomes known, people exploit that. And if you're not proactively maintaining your WordPress website, then you're in for a world of trouble. So I would say that's kind of the major thing. Other problems with WordPress, I think what's been happening with the site editor, which used to be this it's called the classic editor, and then now we have Gutenberg, which is the block-based editor. I will say that I was definitely one of the last to adopt that. I like to think of myself as someone who handles change well, but something that's such a fundamentally big part of just dealing with WordPress, the editing experience, that was definitely a difficult thing to adjust to. But now that I've taken the time to get to know it a little bit better, to watch videos that other people put together to understand how to use different things, that definitely helped me a lot. And I'm actually in the process of redesigning my website to work with Gutenberg, not only for that reason, but I'm really excited to see where that goes. So I think the good news is whatever challenges that seem to come up with WordPress, we have such a great community and so many smart people who are capable of making changes, or who know how to rally the right people to make changes. And so I think that the future for WordPress is very bright.
Yeah, that's true. I fully agree with you. I just want to talk about, since we both kind of agree with one problem, that is security. Of course, this is not even a question that why security is important. It is important. If your blog goes down, you lose customers. But anything is specific in context of WordPress, where security is a bit different than either other CMSs or any other applications or any other platforms?
Sure. One of the things is the login page. And so usually when somebody is logging into their WordPress site, it's www.yourdomain.com/WP-admin or WP-login. These are kind of the most common paths to that login page. And so, one thing that people do to try to circumvent people having easy access to the login page is just renaming it. But a lot of people don't do that. So it becomes an easy problem. It's an issue that's easy for hackers to get past if you have, say, for example, a weak combination of your username and password. Once they get through to that page, they can just use their tools to figure it out. And then that's another thing, is a weak combo of usernames and passwords. A lot of people will just use admin as their username, or password as their password, or something else that's just doesn't use, different cases, or, doesn't incorporate numbers or symbols. And so there's a lot of really easy things you can do to circumvent the problems that WordPress sort of comes built in with. And if you don't know a lot about security, you don't know necessarily to do these things, but stuff like that, stuff like DDoS attacks, where people are, continuously trying different passwords and trying to overload your system and things like that. There are plugins that you can install to limit the DDoS attacks, or to limit login attempts. So yeah, there's definitely a ton of vulnerable spots on WordPress. There's no question about that. I think the most important thing for anybody watching this video would be to educate yourself about WordPress's vulnerabilities, and then put solutions in place, whether that's a little bit of code or a plugin, or just using a stronger username and password. You're going to save yourself from the majority of bad attacks. And then I think the last thing on a similar note to make note of is just make sure that you have some sort of backup solution in place. There's a good chance on any given day that you could get hacked, just to be real. That's not to say that it's going to happen, but you always want to be prepared for that possibility. And if somebody gets in and messes with your website, you don't want to have to code it all from scratch. It's a lot easier to have a backup that you could just restore after you handle whatever that security issue was. So just make sure that you have something like that in place.
Right. You said it, very clearly, but the problem is that there are two aspects of anything. One is the technology solution, one is the people problem.
Hmm.
I can give you, not you, but I can give somebody a fully armored Hummer car, but if you do not lock your doors, you're not safe. Similarly, if you look at Apple, they do a lot of stuff to make iOS very very secure, and it is one of the most secure operating systems there. But if you're keeping your password 123, it doesn't really matter. So
Right.
there's nothing we can do to for people who are not wanting to do that. But Apple knows that
Right.
their users are not tech savvy people, they're average people, so they have baked in a lot of security measures to make
Hmm.
it more secure. So unless and until you're really 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 not careful, your device will be secure. So there's nothing we can do to people. We talk about education, we talk about awareness. That doesn't happen. People set up
Yeah.
the blog. They just want to create a blog where they share their recipes. They don't have time to go and read. And they should not be, right? Why should I need to learn how to fix my car engine? All I want to go is just to drive from place X to place Y. So
Yeah.
it should not be their job. So people, we can do only so much. That some best practices should be there, just the way we do at our homes. We don't leave our locks open, right? We do. So that is
Totally.
basic. But if we do bake in some of those security features into WordPress as well, it does protect a lot of users. I came across last week Polyverse. They announced poly scripting that makes WordPress more secure. Can you talk about that? Because I do see it does make it very very easy for people to make their sites more secure without having to become security experts.
Yeah, I think the best way to put this into context for people who are familiar with security issues in the WordPress community is to talk about some of the plugins recently that have been affected by zero-day vulnerabilities. So, like, one that comes to mind, and one that I actually use, is called Social Warfare. And there was, some sort of code that got exploited, and then the hackers were able to inject their own code so that when people went to those websites that were affected, it would like redirect people to a new, spammy website, which obviously is not ideal. You don't want to be sending people that go to your website somewhere else. So what polyscripting is just taking your PHP code, whether that exists in like a plugin or a theme or like those core WordPress files, and basically like encrypting it, like making it unintelligible for those hackers. Like there's no easy access point because it's not, if two different websites were using like this polyscripting functionality, then both of them would have different things for like a hacker to look at. It wouldn't just be like, okay, here's this function and this is what that function, this is what the page that function relates to, or something like that. They would see different things, and so it would then be a lot more difficult for them to be able to do anything. In fact, it would probably be impossible if the code was encrypted in a way that a hacker couldn't unencrypt. So it seems to me like a really great solution. I'm thinking especially for enterprise websites, just any possible vulnerabilities, being able to protect against that. The more you can do, the better, because even kind of going back to that example of Social Warfare, they released a patch immediately to that fix, but that's not to say that everybody immediately updated it. So for someone like me, who I have like an old blog from my college days, that I'm not on that every day. I'm not paying attention to it. I do have some things set up for monitoring it to see if it's down or whatever, but I'm not necessarily looking for issues. I'm not necessarily like logging in to make sure that everything looks right. So really for any website that you're not looking at all the pages every day, you want to have some sort of proactive solution in place, because otherwise you're just taking the risk that your website is not performing the way that you want it to, and that can certainly hurt trust with your audience. And if it's the first time they're visiting your website, they may never come back if they see some spam.
That's true. And And yeah, the beauty is that the one of the reasons why WordPress is kind of one of the top target is that you find an exploit, you wrote an exploit, and you can now attack millions of sites there. When with polymorphing, it kind of becomes impossible. So the bar for your effort goes higher, and the returns on investment is lower. So there won't be much incentive for your efforts. Yeah. So yeah, that is the incredible work that they're doing there. Now let's just scale back and talk once again about the work that you're doing. So far, 2020 has been crazy year. We don't even know what it's going to look like in the next couple of months. But what are the things that you are planning in terms of WordPress community?
Yeah, my plans as far as what's next with the WordPress community and how I plan to be involved is continuing to get involved with WordCamps as a speaker, as an organizer. I will be speaking at this WordCamp as well, and my talk is specifically about changing or transitioning my business from being me as a freelancer to having the Blogsmith as an agency where there are multiple people who are working for me under certain processes and for very specific types of customers. I'm still planning to be involved as a WordPress Denver Meetup organizer. And yeah, I'm always just looking for ways that I can get involved and help other people. I guess one other thing that I'll mention is I run weekly office hours on Thursdays that people can book for free, and specifically to talk about like COVID-19 and how to adapt their business strategy from what it was to something that could survive in this new economy that we're dealing with. So I think the future is definitely bright for WordPress, and even for the businesses that have been affected by this crappy situation. But it's definitely going to be a lot of work from here on out to kind of get back on track.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. Maddy, thank you so much for taking time out and sitting down here and talking to me today. And I look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.
Likewise.